What we've got here is a pretty fabulous Chinese robe that I think probably was used by the wearer maybe as a kimono or a wrap of some sort. It's a very interesting example of a type of garment and a type of embroidery that you see a lot anywhere really from the 1870s, 80s when the Orientalist movement started, well into the teens, the 20s, maybe even the early 30s. The more I look at this, the more I'm thinking this is probably 20s. The type of embroidery that you see here is again done with a floss, not a twisted thread. We've got a floss here with a gazillion different gorgeous colors. This is peach, pink, celadon, russet, French blue, navy blue. What I also notice here is this inset band. Again, the colors don't bleed in and out. They're all very specific kind of sections of them. And ditto here on this band. There's a very pretty teeny tiny little braid, and that looks to me like it was put on by hand because I can't see any machine stitching. There's quite a lot of machine sewing in here too, I would bet, if it's 1920s. This is a Chinese export piece. You can tell by the cut. That is the kind of cut you'd see on a Manchu court robe. Slightly modified. When they were doing these things, because they were export pieces, they were done in production runs, they needed to kind of move it along to get it done. The shape is very simple. The embroidery, while it looks complicated, it's really color, 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 which means they could have had 3 people working on this side, 3 people working on that side, and they'd have pushed it out. The embroidery here and the embroidery here are separate pieces altogether. This is not stopped within the seam. This is running right off. So they were embroidering yardage, cutting it out, seaming it, and putting the bias tape over it. Another indication that it was made to be done for export, AKA made fast, is this is a completely separate component, and these are separate components. But what's interesting about this is an embroidered collar, okay? The embroidery stops within the border. This was a very specific design to sit in here. They could have had 4 people making collars. They could have had a million people embroidering the bodies. This, however, is yardage, and it was cut out. You can see it goes off into the seams. It stops at this edge, and it stops at this edge clear of the black tape, but it runs off into there, and it runs off into there, and at the miter, they just took a straight band, put a 45-degree on it with the sewing machine, and it was done. But they did a very nice job binding it with these little bias edges. The black edging is very, 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 very common in these. I think it's just for a graphic feel. And this little delicate blue thing there is just a pretty way to kind of conceal that. This might have been embroidered as a cuff band because the embroidery stops. This, however, was yardage because it runs off into the seams, which means they were cutting right through it. This is definitely Chinese embroidery. All the motifs are Chinese. For example, that fretwork right there, that's a classic Chinese motif. The way they did the birds, that's very, very Chinese with all that spiky feather kind of thing. The geometrics are Chinese. That's fretwork right there. That's that more than anything. But also I've seen a lot of this type of thing, and it's definitely Chinese. The way they do a butterfly, and there's bamboo, little bits of water. It's really neat, actually. All the scroll work, completely Chinese. The frogs, the little twisted silk buttons. It's an outrageous combination of like quick and dirty, cut through the embroidered border and put a piece of trim in there, and then these delicate little bias edging. I'll tell you what was making all this so popular and hot and sexy and fabulous with silent movies. There was a lot of this kind of exotic stuff in the silent films, and I think it was probably made for an American market.